Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the COVID-19 New Crisis Same Story series. In episode 5, we heard from nonprofit leaders across the country focused on disrupting racial economic inequality by working to protect cost-burdened families and communities facing a loss of housing and discussing the widespread impact of expiring eviction and foreclosure moratoriums. More of their voices and experiences are captured in our new report, COVID-19 New Crisis Same Story, highlighting the innovations to racial economic inequality from leaders of color. In today's episode, we are focusing on the long-standing and new issue emerging around education. The final episode in the Racial Economic Equity series introduces community leaders in Dallas, Baltimore, and New Orleans who are working in their cities across sectors to ensure students and educators have what they need to be successful. In today's episode, we will review how COVID-19 has exacerbated the already present challenges in education. We'll discuss how partnerships across sectors have been crucial in meeting the needs to students and communities. We'll close by reviewing solutions in both programming and practice that will create proper supports and equitable recovery. In today's episode, you're going to hear from Madeline Santana, who is a program associate on the Racial Wealth Divide Initiative team at Prosperity Now, who will be moderating today's conversation with Erin Offord, the Senior Director of Programs at Big Thought, Monique Cox, who's the Executive Director at Urban Alliance, and Joanne Miner, who is the Chief Operations Officer at Ashe Cultural Center. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Madeline to get us started.
Great, thank you, Tupa. And welcome. I want to take a second before we jump into the conversation to just set the context a little bit further, because we've been seeing that COVID has had deep and far-reaching implications for education, impacting things like student loan debt, food insecurity, homelessness, mental health, internet services, college education, career development, childcare, just to name a few. These disparities we see in education, especially in K through 12, are often understated. Schools, much like nonprofits, are often tasked with narrowing the resource gaps for low-income communities and students. In this way, many others. When students are forced away from these institutions, whether it be from natural disaster, violence or policing, a global pandemic like the likes of what we're seeing today, the gap that we're seeing rears its ugly head to be not an achievement gap, but a resource gap. Our nonprofit leaders are keenly aware of these gaps and are working to fill and bridge this divide. Community leaders are working with folks from across our ecosystems with food banks, mental health services, hospitals, tech hubs to fill in these gaps. With this new school year approaching, there are new challenges and considerations, implications for student education. About 3/4 of survey respondents want schools to open in the fall, but have concerns about young people's safeties. And here to speak today about some of these challenges they're seeing from Baltimore, Dallas, New Orleans. We're going to go ahead and dive right in with the questions. First, I want to go to Joanne. COVID-19 pandemic is said to be a pandemic within a pandemic, where old challenges are exacerbating at the same time new issues are arising. Can you talk for a moment about the challenges around education that you're seeing locally?
Yes, thank you, Madam. First of all, the main thing we're seeing is our families who are most in need of support that found through the public schools and attending the public schools are also the least likely to have access to the tools that you would use at home to overcome those challenges. Tablets, laptops, even if our families have access to those tools, they don't necessarily have internet access at home. So that's one of the problems that we are finding, and making sure our family members have the access to those tools. We are finding that our children need access to cultural education. So Ashe Cultural Arts Center is doing the best that we can to provide online access and providing programming that provides that what they need is culturally enriching for children. And our role as an arts, we're not necessarily an arts organization. We use arts and culture to drive community, economic, and human development.
Thank you for sharing. And now I want to go to Monique similarly. Can you talk a little bit about the challenges you're seeing in your city, as well as the fact that you work with high school students, how that might be a little different?
Sure. The digital divide was a major challenge for our students as well. Another challenge was keeping our community engaged. So From our employers facing harsh economic realities to our young people who are graduating seniors, juggling academics with increased responsibilities at home, we wanted to ensure that we kept everyone engaged. Our core program model is providing paid high school internships to high school seniors. So we wanted to ensure that that programming was still running smoothly. There were also economic challenges for our young people. We serve low-income youth of color who already face systemic barriers to opportunity. These barriers are only exacerbated by the pandemic. 80% of our students contribute to the household expenses. So given that this disproportionate impact of COVID has had on their communities, those paychecks become even more critical to their families and are, create a determining factor for what their post-high school plans are. Without the extra support, our youth are at an even greater risk of disconnecting from our from future employment or education. So it is our mission to ensure that our students are fully supported, that we're ensuring that they're continuing to earn income and that they are learning valuable workplace skills.
Thank you. Ms. Erin, if you can speak quickly about what your approach to this crisis has been, how you've been responding to it in your area, as well as what the data that you've collected is showing.
Sure. We definitely, like the other cities, have been feeling the pinch, especially for people of color in marginalized communities. And so we did want to take a step back and really follow 3 principles to make sure we were responding in the right way to the right people. And so we did listen, learn, and then we ultimately responded with different types of programs we offered. What we did here, we did an initial survey with families, and we learned that 63% of that particular audience were considered self-identified essential workers, which really revealed a lot to us on the hourly waged employer, the fact that a lot of people were still working in the pandemic, inclusive of healthcare workers, but bus drivers, grocery workers, and so forth. And there was still concern of what type of support could be available for their children. And we also understood the data, learning a little bit too with the digital divide that Ms. Monique and Ms. Joanna talked about. There was really some implications of the lack of Wi-Fi accessibility in certain communities. An article we read, the divide between the haves and the have-nots revealed that 43% of some of the communities were not subscribing to Wi-Fi. And that was a huge reveal between the southern and northern sector of our city, which primarily a lot of the southern sector communities just were in deserts. We knew they were in food deserts, we knew they were in program deserts, but now the element of a Wi-Fi desert really was impacting the ability to get ahead in learning. And so we responded in 2 ways, a lot of ways, but the 2 here was to really risk and put out there the fact that we needed to consider a socially distanced model program. And so we did lift up an actual program for essential workers and their children that was safe, that we did through partnerships. And we actually were able to put supplies. We had families telling us they needed stuff to do with their kids. And so we delivered creative kits and just things that actually kept kids engaged. To Ms. Monique's point about like the ability to keep them engaged virtually is, for hours, you're limited on that. And so what are the other add-ons that you need for kids to stimulate their learning? And so those were the real things we walked away from really wanting to invest in.
Thank you so much for that. And I'm going to shift gears just a little bit to talk about sort of the partnerships that you've all had in your city. So first I'll go to Ms. Monique. Can you please talk about how you had to get innovative recently with your programming and partnerships to make sure that the students in your community are getting the most help?
Yes, so we adjusted our curriculum to accommodate for a virtual learning environment. We're working with employer partners to help them adapt to virtual internships for this upcoming school year. That's a new world. We're doubling down on the transferable soft skills that we teach our youth to help them adapt to new work situations. And we're also adjusting our curriculum to ensure that our young people know how to navigate this largely virtual work world that we're entering. This is all new for us. So as we're learning, we want to ensure that we are equipping our students with the tools that they need to succeed as they enter adulthood.
Thank you, thank you. And I'll go back to Erin. Similar question: how has Big Thought had to shift and innovate programs to meet the moment in your community and your students' needs?
Sure. Virtual programming and how do we shape and do that work and have the right content that we want to have in that space was important. But the partnership that I think the one that we really took away was the camp I was mentioning earlier, this emergency childcare service we were able to provide for essential workers. And part of it is because the institutions were going, you know, they were gone away in that moment in time. The school systems were gone. You know, there's not necessarily much of the infrastructure. So we had to sort of rely on our collaborative muscle. And so we reached out to folks that we knew, low-hanging fruit, and part of it was we had like-minded conversations of what we wanted to have the solution become. And so we worked with Parkland, which was a health provider system, and they provide a lot of the free healthcare service in our city, and Dallas ISD, which allowed us to host in their school building this 3-week camp that actually focused on SEL. We had trauma-informed methods that we were working with kids who had been through some traumatic situations, but we also wanted to have positive environments for learning. Social interactions was important. And everyone, the beauty of it is everyone leveraged in what their assets and strengths were. So we were able to get the supplies we needed. We were able to have the positive adults in that space. We were able to train them and feed them. And so it was a real testimony to how do you supply the resources needed across the aisle and really work together for what we knew was necessary, which was essential workers and the social well-being of their kids. And with that, we were able to refine some of our skills so that we're prepared when it does come time to lift up in a socially distant way, which we think is probably not going to go away anytime soon. And so to have the knowledge and the procedures to do that safely and have mental well-being in front of mind was important. And so we were grateful to work with those partners to do that.
It's fantastic, thank you. And then we'll go to Ms. Joanne, if you can please tell us about the partnerships with local nonprofits in your ecosystem and how you've been working to make sure that they can keep their doors open to make sure that young people in the community have access to all the supports they may need.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Ashe Cultural Arts Center is known for the collaborative work that we do with other organizations. Right now, one of the most important projects we're working on is a cohort of 16 small organizations. It's a project funded by the Institute of Museum and Library Services. And the point of this project is to discover what ways in which we can improve and expand the capacity of these small organizations that they guard and protect and maintain programming that is so important to our cultural memory. And that's one of the things that we're doing right now. We are working through ways in which we can find especially capacity issues that organizations need, not strictly funding issues. And that's one of what we're doing right now.
That's fantastic as well. Thank you so much. And before we wrap up, I want to use this time and opportunity to let you all get one ask out to people watching. So I want to know, what does your work need and from whom to be the most successful that you can be? We'll start with Erin, then we'll go Monique and Joanne.
Sure. A lot of ask, you know, but the one that we're kind of landing in is our youth. It's the young people that we work with. We're wanting to make sure they're on the front end of being the content contributors in this digital space. This is a whole another skill building that's needed. I think it's the new way of how the work can become, and how do we prepare our young people to not just be consumers, but to actually be creative and content builders moving forward. And we know the schools and everything that's closing, and a little bit of what that means in summer learning, of the learning loss traditionally. But how do we take advantage of this being an opportunity for them to become some of the drivers of what can be available, and have them involved in entrepreneurship opportunities possibly for other people to build on, so that they're in the space of the driving seat. We know, in what we've taken away too through the social justice protests and the anti-racist movements and COVID, is that our young people are capable of leading and are leading. And so sometimes we need to invest, reinvest, especially with young leaders of color, so they are given that opportunity to become equipped with the skill building that's needed in the future. I don't want us to walk out of this and not have a community of young people who can take advantage of the opportunity on digital divide and the learning, and not just not just to consume it, but to own the stories that can come out of that.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was great. I agree with everything Ms. Aaron said. At Urban Alliance, we need more employers investing dollars at a time where we need our interns to continue to be employed. We want to ensure that our young people have access to career pathways that lead them to economic self-sufficiency. We also need corporate and philanthropic dollars supporting evidence-based programs like ours. Not only is opening a door to Black and Brown youth diversity, equity, and inclusion solution, it's also a talent pipeline solution for our employer partners. It ensures that the many barriers our young people are facing right now do not become insurmountable. We have to remember that youth disconnection has a cost for all of us, up to $1 trillion in lost earnings, lower economic growth, lower tax revenue, and higher government spending.
Thank you.
Yeah. And my ask is for people to pay attention to the civic environment. Hold your representatives, your councilmen, hold them accountable for what they are supposed to do to support you in your communities. We ask people to please complete the census. Ask your friends, your family, your colleagues to do the same. It's important. We ask people to register to vote. It's not enough for you to say, I took care of it. Reach out to your friends and family, your colleagues, your children, their children, anybody that's 18 who will be 18 in time. Encourage them to register and vote.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies, all for sharing these insights and highlights, these very real, tangible actions that can be done. And I want to thank you all who are watching for tuning in. If you have not already, I encourage you to check out the previous episodes in the series where leaders are discussing income, health, housing, and employment. Thanks again, everyone, for joining. We appreciate all the work that you've done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.